Let me just say before I begin that I'm not saying any of this as a hater or any of this as a convenient years later guy saying, look at where you f***ed up. These are still games that I like to play. You know, I love every Call of Duty the same, for the most part. World War II and Vanguard really tested my patience as the strongest Christian gamer that I am. All things considered, this comes from a place of love. Today, in essence, we're going to be combining the critique and analysis on Infinity Ward Zombies, done by Stanley557, which the whole video I'd recommend. I'm putting it in the corner. Done very nicely. Critiques the shortcomings of Infinite Warfare, told by someone who's passionate about it. Mix that with the DIY style of Mike and a Pulse, which, sorry to bite the style for this video, but consider it an homage, if you will. Very simplistic, yet very important on correcting the story, not just story beats, just in general motivations, everything about a story. I got inspired because he was doing it a lot with Fallout 4, and in some weird way, in essence, the art style of Bill Burr University, and I would like to exercise a blending of these videos. So with that in mind, and with these three styles in the blender, I would like to offer alternatives on how you could have fixed all of Infinite Warfare zombie modes using what you had already in front of you. First things first, we gotta fix this campaign, and honestly, it's a lot simpler than you think it might be. So, you know, when it comes to being a soldier in the modern day, with the exception of Switzerland, if you're fighting for a world power or a very developed nation, you are not really no longer defending the nation, you're more fighting on its behalf, which is basically a form or another of imperialism, no matter what slant there is on it. But that doesn't mean you still can't have a fun Call of Duty, so let's cut the bullshit. Tired of things having to be critiqued as if they have to make some poignant point or some teaching lesson about something instead of just being what art has always been, which is just art for art's sake, or it's just there. I don't need any philosophical questions in my video games. It's not really anything asked of any other video game, and when you ask for it in a video game, you get cringe results, versus the vice versa of that, not asking for anything and getting something profound, like Last of Us, or God of War, or Spec Ops: The Line, any of those. So, when you set Call of Duty in space, like you had with Infinite Warfare, it presented to me something a lot cooler that you could have done with the Call of Duty series. You could have used the fantasy element of being so far in the future to ask questions about war and warfare and where modern warfare will be in the future, you know, and we didn't. We just got somewhat evil corporations somehow had First Nation. Evil corporations somehow had the military capability of a world superpower, went unchecked, and then invaded the Earth, or whatever the storyline was with Jon Snow. I just remember it was whack. So anyway, I'll just say more. I won't hate on it. I'll say more what you could have done with it. So to me, what I saw is something very simple as a get in, get out kind of game. You could still use the Corpos in Space theme like they did use in Infinite Warfare, but instead it would have been a lot cooler to have this gray area of corporations using soldiers that are very human, very personal, very individualized, and from a conga line of multicultural backgrounds to fight each other for the company's behalf in space. Or, like a Western, it would have been cool to have been the United States government sorting out corporation misdoing in space. Use the giant dick of the USAF to punish any wrongdoing. Unfortunately, it seems as though that might be a dangerous idea to send to people, that we actually hold corporations in line. But it could have been cool, you know. I was thinking somewhere along the lines of Metal Gear Solid 5, like the idea that you are a mercenary trying to get in and get out. And then I would even merge it with Fallout 4, make you like somebody who got injured, kind of like Vanilla Sky or Abre los Ojos, where you would have been a soldier from the Global War on Terror, the GWOT era, and you were revived in space to find out that you're poor in this very unforgiving, money-driven world. So then you sign up to go sort something out in space, and what you sort out in space is actually way bigger than you could have imagined, and would take a whole adventure and a whole crew of ex-SF that consider you an old man. It would have been cool, man out of time, making money in the future. So you could get back home to what's left of your family or your descendants, and all of that sounds like a cool concept, but unfortunately that's not where they went with it. But it's fine, because it's easy to talk now. I will say that this video is in 2023, years later. Anyway, that's what I would have done with the story if we were given the possibility to do it in space, which just opens up everything to not being as cartoony as it was. But I can't get mad at Infinity Ward, because they did imagine something crazy of like a company invading Earth. Not to be confused with Advanced Warfare, where a company is the most unchecked on Earth, and then the usual. But from there, let's get into the zombie map packs or concepts, ideas. Alright, first, as a whole, I would like to say that all the eras merge too much. Like, in the Infinite Warfare map pack DLCs, conceptually, you are going from the 80s to the 90s to the 70s to present day. But to me, in terms of what's been done culturally, even up to that point, all those in one way or another have been overdone and are almost continuing to get overdone, which changes the way we perceive them by so many remakes or visions and thoughts on how we look at them. Just keep coming, and slowly you'll see, whether fictional or true, whether extremely accurate or not, all of these depictions will come to shape how we look at these eras when we look back. Anyway, that's a tangent. Conceptually, 80s, 90s, 70s and 80s are kind of next to each other. I mean, there are, stylistically, the 70s is like psychedelic, but we're coming out of that. Or psychedelic, but that is slowly fading away, because synth and everything from the late 70s to the early 80s is going to take over, neon, all that. Then the 90s, a little different, a little bit the same. I don't know. Don't ask me to define the 90s. I was only alive for like 3 years of those. Anyway, like I said, they all merge too much. If you really want to give people the old razzle dazzle, you'll have to get a little more creative. And that doesn't mean that I don't like the concepts. I really like some of the ideas of these maps. Heck, I'll even say that the original trailer with Relax in it, in the commercial, it had me so hyped for what Zombies in Spaceland would have been. But then when we saw how the base game was, I think that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth for gameplay on that Zombies map, whatever. Okay, so overall, I think the movie idea still works, where William Wyler throws the cast and crew in different movies and all that. But stylistically, I would make it more of an inside joke, because they really missed something here, where they could have had the developers model themselves and show the lead developer as if he's like showing them old movies, and that's movies, quote unquote, or games, quote unquote, and it would be each of these maps with a different theme. And then and you could even make that a funny inside joke, where the developers comment on the stereotype of the characters in each iteration, which you can still keep the jock, the girl, the nerd, and whatever the other guy is supposed to be. But and even if you didn't want William Wyler, you could have done a more popular director or something, like get Quentin Tarantino or somebody that was like popular with the age group, because these guys are a pretty wide group of people, that the newer people that like his stuff, older people that were alive when it came out. That would have been somewhere cool, to have him host and say, almost as if he's like throwing pitch meetings for each and every Zombies idea. But then I guess he would have shaped them how he would have wanted to, so I don't know. But again, either him or just devs, it would have been nice to tip the hat to them, since they are the ones working on it. And you can use that idea for the intro cutscenes that would set up the levels like they did already. Before I begin, I would also like to say I really love Elvira and Svengoolie. I love them. The SpongeBob picture. They would have been a good choice as well if you didn't want to do a director, you didn't want to do the game devs. You would have somebody host a video countdown kind of compilation like those guys, or like they used to do, and and host so many videos, marathons. It sucks we don't even say marathons anymore. Nobody knows what that means besides the running ones. Anyway, yay! Okay, for the first one, I would replace Zombies in Spaceland and instead set it in either the late 1800s or the early 1900s. I forget what century that is. I would have made Ragtime Zombies. I would keep exo jump, exo movements, but not model any exos on them. Just have the plain character models, make it funnier and cooler. And it would be cool if there was some kind of Easter egg that activated like a sepia tone, and these zombies in this period piece, it would be very slapstick, so you get the fast motion, and you get one-hit melees or whatever they did on the Shaolin map, but instead with less fanfare and looking more just like a punch. You could even reuse the animation cycle, or whatever it's called, motion, of when you melee somebody with your knife, but just animate the knife out, and make it look very cheaply like you're punching somebody. I think what I like about the original COD Zombies, can't say Zombies, but even though that's how I know it, that's crazy. I'm old as heck. The original Zombies wasn't afraid to be itself, and I'm sure there's a lot of things that they thought was cheesy, but they made it work with what they had in terms of the game or whatever. So I think you could have taken a chance, and even if it looks choppy or whatever, have all those movements anyway, and it would have helped have the whole map and the whole gameplay style just be very slapstick humor. You could even tone down the gore and just make it like whatever, but I thought it would be very interesting to have the whatever modern pistols of Infinite Warfare in there. Or even no, you could just make the era appropriate models if you wanted to, and then throw a slant on them with elements, or include the perk system, but instead with cigars and tonics, so it's appropriate to the era. It would be very cool, That's what I thought, because honestly, the 80s mixed with cyber warfare, although it does seem like it would work, doesn't work, or at least it doesn't work the way they used it. If they had done something like RoboCop, where you lean into how cheesy the 80s were, but you're leaning into sci-fi fantasy, that would have been cooler. But instead, it's like this uncanny valley of zombies somehow and aliens somehow, but you have like a futuristic Glock that's automatic. And like the Glock, of course, existed in the 80s, I know that. And it would still work in there, but I don't know, it would have been cool to have Cold War era appropriate weaponry. Which in general would have been cool to have in the base game, because, these weapon systems are already how much old, and they're still found in battlefields today, Anyway, yeah, it would have been nice. Pistols and melee, Ragtime Zombies, make it funny. Give the map the flow of the multiplayer maps, have like a cliff where they run and they have to like make the run or they die. Like that wall in Black Ops 2 Zombies. Don't quote me, wherever it's from. Or, if you even want to make a nod to the original Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4 2006 or 2007, remember once you completed the campaign, or was it collected all the intel, you got this thing called Ragtime, and it would make everything shoot fast, and it had that piano overlay that would keep playing over and over, but it was very fun. And you could even make that an ability instead of just an Easter egg, so that way if they wanted to, everybody would get rapid fire when that vision was triggered, the sepia tone was triggered, and make things double as fast, but also make the zombies move twice as fast as well. So you can train them and mow them down if you want, but also you have to be aware that there are no slow movers or crawlers. Everybody's moving at again, just ideas. And I really love that. Sound off below if you really remember that and love that. I thought it was funny too. Even when you died, it looked so funny because like the enemies were really pumping you and all the RPMs on all the firearms went up. It's crazy. And if you really wanted to, you could use the different hand motions and make power-ups like Bioshock. And let's say you didn't use that. It would be funny to include an invisible gun. Just remove the model and have it as a pickup, like a glowing exclamation mark or something cool, because like on when it comes to game design and these zombie modes, I really liked how cool and interesting the first random box was with the glowing question marks. So do something like that, and then have like a funny invisible model gun where it just looks like your characters are holding nothing, and yeah. Or even if not, Ragtime Zombies, because I forget, before I wrap this idea up, was Ragtime in the 1920s? If it is, you could have era-appropriate submachine guns, machine guns, quote-unquote, lever action, bolt action rifles, stuff like that. Just use the, whatever that intervention thing was. Or you can even have fancy semi-autos, and you could use those prototypes that have all probably been beaten to death since Battlefield 1 or whatever, but they would be appropriate here because it's so fantasy that it's weird and it works. I don't know. Ideas. Let's move on. Alright, kids. So you asked me, Rave in the Redwoods, hypothetically you're asking me this. Rave in the Redwoods has a lot of neon. How would you replace it? Would you stay in the woods? My answer to both of those questions, no. I would turn it into a map that I call Shibuya Fish Co. And I would make it cyberpunk. That way, if there's any futuristic stuff from the campaign in-game that you've modeled already, recycle the hell out of it, use it here. So the concept for this would be, instead of zombies, you have creatures like mutant fish and other maritime wildlife or whatever, and you're like a fish company that is dispatched to kill these animals and package them for consumption. And like the whole concept of this was a post-apocalyptic world that doesn't look dirty and nasty as maintained by robots. And you can build the whole world building intro, make it very simple. A lot of times you don't have to clarify everything. This is just the zombies map. But it would be fun, just show into the intro, they're like, hey, this movie's about robots that help us rebuild after nuclear war, and these two guys are just, a bunch of slackers that work at a fish company, and they kill them and, package them. But because it's post-apocalypse, they literally have to catch them in like a semi-urban, naval kind of map. And you could even put in, like, make it a huge map, make the edges of the city on one side, make a fisherman's outpost on the other, and let them wade through the water, almost like Shinonuma, but Shinonuma but bigger. And I swear I didn't have that idea to make Japan on Japan. It just kind of came to me right now. And you can have Japanese characters that aren't Takyo. And I'm choosing peace. I won't get into why, but it'd be cooler. Japanese for Japanese characters. Anyway, I really thought that I liked that I would incorporate in this mode to make it funny and interesting an Easter egg where if you could get the other player to agree by hitting a lever, you could forcibly quit the game whenever. Or if not, just let it go infinitely and explain in game that when you're done, hit this shift button, punch out. And that would be a fun Easter egg. You could quit the match if you wanted to, but make sure that players agree. Like if you're on single player, make it one lever, and if it's online, make it a bunch of them. I don't know, I just thought that'd be funny, since the whole theme is like you guys night shift, fish company. And then you could really use the neon to work, and that way, just like Rave in the Redwoods, and like 556 said, the neon and how the engine handles it and everything could just flourish and shine, and it would be nighttime, but you would use water and make everything look all wet and sexy. Anyway, yeah, this and it's funny, I said Shibuya, like Shibuya's close to the coast, it's a little tucked in, but I don't know, I could either make up that the apocalypse just erased Mito or whatever is around it. But I don't know, Shibuya rolls off the tongue for English speakers a lot cooler, a lot better than Mito or whatever was next to it. with that lovely intro, we're on to our next one. How would I replace the Shaolin Shuffle? This is basically the extent of my ideas. I guess technically I missed the map, which is the final map, on how I'd replace it. But I came up with 2 ideas for the replacement for Shaolin Shuffle, so. So, first, to replace Shaolin Shuffle, I would have a map set in the 1700s. I'm not sure what part of it, preferably the later part, to make gameplay, weapons, character design, clothing design cooler, because some periods are a bit hazy and others are what is more culturally understood as what this era is, like era defining things. Anyway, at first I thought Ancient Warfare would have been cool, and we already know post that Black Ops 4 did it somewhat with that ancient arena and all that stuff, but it would have been cool to have swords, melee, and then here for sure I would employ that idea, like I mentioned in the other part, of weird hand gestures and all that, like they did in BioShock, that shoot out different elements, water, fire, laser, whatever, but instead tweak that slightly a little, and then have swords, bows, flintlock, cannonballs, various melee options, and it would have been cool to, first of all, in general, it'd be cool to have a free moving vehicle on zombies. Most of them are on the rails, guided, go to point A, point B things, like the pods from Ascension, or the pulley system on Shinonuma. I guess technically the teleporters on Kino. But yeah, you see they're all on the rails. There's never been a zombies map where they kind of treat you like Dead Island and they let you just go wherever with it. But it'd be cool to have like a flying boat, because the whole thing's supernatural. And anyway, what I really liked about this idea on how I would replace Shaolin Shuffle with 1700s, it would be warring colonial factions that have to work together on a cursed island. So you'd have like a Spaniard and a Frenchman who have only recently, and their whatever colonial conscripts, let's not get into that, fighting against each other, well actually now with each other. And imagine if you were trying to claim somewhere and it was cursed, and you had to fight skeletons that are somehow moving and want to hurt you. And yeah, and that would be it. The explanation would be that the skeletons don't want to eat you like the zombies do, they just want to beat you to death. And it would have been cool to have had that original chemistry like the original 4 with Takeo, Richtofen, Dempsey, and Nikolai. And instead you would have various colonial agents like the British, French, Spanish, whatever, or even just different factions of whoever they employed to do that on an island. I don't know, I would have called it Hispaniola, but it doesn't have to be like Puerto Rico or whatever. And like, I don't know, I thought that was very cool. You want to give the Flintlocks variations, you just give them elemental spin-offs, just like they did with it's not 5, what is that called, the World War I map. Anyway, I thought that would have been cool, you know, swords, one-hit melee, skeletons, treasure island. And I would even make it a night map. You know, like the guy said in his video, I've been quoting it wrong, I just said 556, but whatever. I'll list the name in text right here, and it's no dig at him. I love you. I'm on a roll. So, like he said, I would keep it with night, and I would make it like a solar eclipse, like Darius was. And, you know, it writes itself. Use the dynamic lighting from the torches, and then have some areas that's off dark, that you have to use a torch. That way, the player's not limited to go through these areas, but they just can't see shit. Kind of like Transit, but not as bad or unforgiving, and without those little gremlins. And then like Shinonuma, you could have water everywhere that would limit the movement. And, you know, I like that idea. And you could even bring back the exo movement because of cursed objects, relics, or whatever. So almost like Uncharted 4, you're saying this character has this ancient object, which is why he can do this ability, so you can get away with the mixture of fictional setting with fictional powers, but they're actually very cool, and they give it a spin on it, so it's not just the usual FPS, you know, especially if you were going to take the one chance you had to make aliens or something cool, and you're using the zombies formula. at least, have fun with it. But yeah, bring back exo movement. Um, the reason I like exo movement with these period pieces and time settings is because the spin and the contradiction of mixing them makes it more interesting. If I were to put this on the Shibuya map, it would be it could work, but it'd be boring. It's cooler and funner to have the players limited in movement, but have all these fancy gadgets, wazzy woozits, do its, whatever you call it, machine fuck off machines, to help them. But yeah, that was one idea. Okay, or or the second part of this. Why do you call this section 1700 to 2000? And what I thought was, why not just flip the script completely? And I put surrealist film, but I didn't have the time or patience to study surrealist films for inspiration. I know a lot of them are just unconventional. It's just like long takes of whatever. Um, I think technically some of Tchaikovsky's work fits in that. I think, I don't know. Don't quote me. It's been like 3 years since I've been in film school. Anyway, a surrealist film, or fuck it, indie 2000s is what I had, and indie 2000s really gave me hope. So I had in somewhere in my what I wrote down that I read off of the thing called a script, that I wanted to make the joke, which way, modern man, remake or babies, and then I modified the image of like the Sunshine House versus the Goth House. But instead, they're both goth houses. I don't know, very funny. But in all honesty, doing things these days is either a remake or for kids, but not a cool way for kids. And you give them cool fantasy and complex storyline, complex characters because you don't think that they're stupid idiots. Instead, it is fully thinking they're stupid idiots and doing the bare minimum. Anyway, I really liked what I thought about first was the cheese map on Call of Duty Zombies. If any of you are familiar, if not, I'm explaining it right now. But the cheese map was a modded map where everything was yellow and it looked very cool and interesting, and it was just so creative that you took something as scary as World at War Zombies and combined it with something as stupid as cheese. I thought originally it was like a SpongeBob themed map, but finding footage of whatever correct caption it is hard because there's been so many remakes of the SpongeBob of Bikini Bottom as a zombies map, and that's cool. But in the same vein of all of this, I would like to explore the idea of something that resembles to me Indies 2000 part. I really love, like, imagine if you had Wes Anderson zombies map. That's what I like, something completely wacky, and why not use all the modern mechanics and laser stuff that you took from the base game about mercenaries and just make it wacky. So initially, when I thought of this idea down the chain of the line of silly and out there and crazy, I thought about Portal 2 and the lab from Uncharted. And you can make zombies completely keep the mechanics, but just visually just go out there. I really love the lab from Uncharted. I will never not love the lab from Uncharted. In fact, I'll keep a tiny piece of it in the screen playing because I love it so much. See how on that map it's so colorful and so basic? You could turn it into that and then conceptually tie that into Portal 2 and have robots versus robots and make these humanoid zombie robots that are like defective and malfunctioning, and maybe you're a human in an exosuit. And if you don't want to say that, then like maybe you're just another robot that's not infected with some kind of AI mind virus. So you're programmed to like escort a baby or a plant or something, and you just mix all the tropes together. Wall-E, 2001: Space Odyssey, System Shock. Just throw it all in the blender and make like a surreal kind of weird. Everything else gets remade to death, but the indie 2000s where things were just silly and wacky, kind of like Food Party. Which is weird because you figure that it's already time to do retro stuff, so I wonder why they haven't beat um, 2010 revisions to death. And maybe we're not there yet. Maybe we'll have to give it a few more years. But I kind of miss the quirkiness, the colorfulness, and everything of the 2010s. Doesn't mean I want to stay in it forever, but Nostalgia-wise, it applies to me. It applies to a lot of people way more than just doing 70s, 80s, 90s, but what you gonna do? What you gonna do? I wanted something like that. So tone down the violence, just make it completely absurd. You could have guns that look like bananas but shoot lasers, or things that are quote unquote magic. Something even like the emitter from Little Big Planet, and make it spawn something, and that way you could kill robots with objects. Yeah, I really thought that would be cool. And if you wanted gore, you could put oil and stuff, and melee and lasers, but I would not use any of like the ballistic firearms. Whatever lasers we modeled for the base game, I would bring them into here, and it'd be really cool. Alright, with this last one, I didn't intend for it to end up how it did. When I originally wrote this idea down, this critique, I got inspired while rewatching Stanley 557's video. I thought to myself, hey, the 1950s theme of like the creature from the Goo Lagoon, whatever, this whole shtick they got, it could work, and it would have been a lot cooler if you set it in the Soviet Union. Because, you know, America, because during the Cold War it made movies that ended up everywhere, even the Soviet Union, not good or bad, just is. That stuff's kind of beat to death, and like I like where they went with it in terms of having mutant crabs and, you know, 1950s kind of Art Deco stuff or whatever. You know, it looked cool. I like that the one guy's in the USGI uniform, whatever, you know, got the Cold War American uniform on, and I thought to myself, it would have been a lot cooler to see the Soviet equivalent of that. So instantly, right away, I did research on what it was called. The helmets, I don't know, these two Cyrillic characters for CW68, which is why I named this chapter that, because I wasted so much tangential time trying to figure out what the Soviet webbing system, which would be the Cold War equivalent to the Alice system, which replaced the earlier, like, M56 webbing equipment carrying stuff they used in, like, World War II. Then Alice gets replaced by Molly, and that's where we end up with ladders and tack vests. And I could not figure out for the life of me what it was called, but, you know, Soviet appropriate stuff. He would have had an AKM. He would have had this helmet, which was replacing the SSH-48, whatever it was called. Finding out about the Soviet equipment was hard, and I had to listen to a cringe, cheeky, hard-bass British guy explain Soviet equipment, which he didn't even give me an accurate description. Anyway, I thought this didn't help me. This is a tangent. You know, might as well go back to writing the idea. But I have written here that I wanted to make a joke that the cheeky hardbass stuff is lame, and there's nothing like showing the Reds that we're still ignorant idiots in the West, even after the Cold War. Which is weird, because I wrote that as if he's American. He's British. I don't really have to claim him. If any creator could say, hey, Russians, I'm sorry that you had to see that, it would be me. Not a dig at that guy either, you know, people like their subcultures, whatever. Alright, so with that, I thought it would have been a lot cooler to see the Soviet iteration of, like, the creature from the Goo Lagoon. And I had it right here written that you could set it in Yalta. Yalta? I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And whatever the Cyrillic underneath Yalta means, which is in Ukraine, the Ukrainian SSR. I don't know if the equipment would have been the same, because throughout the Soviet Union, various republics had their own very unique shaped helmets. A lot of the Soviet or SSR equipment, the helmets look like phallic. And that's a tangent. But anyway, still, like, the same way you see the lineup of characters, like the nerd, the housewife, the soldier, and the other guy, you could see the Soviet nerd, Soviet housewife, Soviet whatever. And I thought, use a lot of those aspects of that same map, but make it sunset. Somewhere later in the video, Stanley 557 says that they can do sunsets really good with the engine. I would just, in this hypothetical that we know what our engine could do, I would set this at sunset. That way, wife goes for a walk, soldiers on patrol, yada yada. It would be some incident where, like, some creature, and I don't know if you want to tie it into Ukrainian folklore or whatever or not, It would be a creature coming out of the ocean and just start attacking people. And either the creature could make a virus and then you could justify having zombies, or you could just spawn a bunch of creatures, which I'm a big fan of. In Stanley 557 his review where he talks about the crabs, it would have been fun to just kill a maritime animal that's mutated. And the Ukraine is by the Black Sea, but you could get weird looking deep sea creatures that want to eat people and each other, and it would be very cool to just try to stop them. The scientist or the nerd would be able to create either serums that undo venom from whatever these various marine animals, or and he would have medical knowledge. The soldier would have slight medical knowledge, but not as much as the nerd. But the nerd could also mix chemical weapons, like we see with these craftables that Stanley 557 explained that took too much of his time up. And I thought it would be very cool to see a picturesque Soviet beach setting instead of seeing the usual "the Soviet Union is bad, concrete" jokes or maps that take a dig at it, and you could kind of see the other side aspect of Soviet life, or technically Ukrainian SSR life. And then it'd be cool, like, you don't even have to do that many stereotypes: husband, wife, soldier, nerd, and that's it. And like, you could do different types of soldiers. What would be really cool is if you made this version of the map, made respawns available, and then used tactical insertion like the flare from Modern Warfare 2, but instead the 1950s era appropriate flares, Soviet flares for that. And it'd be cool if you could respawn, and then we would use the gag that we used on Shibuya, and you could end it with the nuke. But if you end it with the nuke, you would have to find a place on the map to hide, very accurate to real life lore of the Cold War, and you could end it. But I thought that would be a very cool idea, and it was right there. The Volk, which is a gun that was included in the real game, in this universe, this whatever, but let's just say hypothetically the Volk made it into our version of Infinite Warfare, and that is the model of the AK already there. I mean, granted, I don't want to say AK is AK, because the AKM is very different from the AK-47. In terms of animation, it's not that much of a stretch. Not to mention, there's so many other crimes of like gun models looking weird in Call of Duty, especially for the modern iteration. Then, you could even, for this map, make it so that whoever chooses the housewife character, or the husband, or the scientist, don't get respawns. But whoever chooses to be a soldier, regardless of if they're Ukrainian or if they're straight from Moscow or Russia or whatever, the soldiers get infinite respawns so long as they mark where, and they spawn in. They just pop up wherever. How's that for commentary? Take that, woke moralist. Anyway, yeah, these are all just spitballing ideas. All of them take less resources and would be a lot cooler. And ultimately, if I could say anything to the devs, is, at least from what I took it to be, I don't know what kind of orders you get, but if I were making this little tacked on mode that was initially only just a last minute add-on, I wouldn't be afraid to go ham with it, just have fun with it. You don't even have to explain why a character would just spawn out. Everything else is game mechanics. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of level of believability versus game mechanics, and people will fill in the gaps how they see fit. So you won't please everybody. Obviously, if someone's a real mil-sim kind of guy, he's going to say, why'd they spawn out of thin air? But then again, this is a mutant crab Zombies replacement game mode. Gosh, and all this talking, I didn't even get to the main part I wanted to get to. Even if you don't do the beach, even if you don't do Soviet creature from the Goo Lagoon, you could have done something, while we're still on this topic of Soviet, you could have done an homage to like Solaris and do period piece 1970s sci-fi a la, 2001 or anything of that manner. But you know what I mean? You could have went in that direction, Solaris, or even Stalker, the movie. That way you have clear cinematic eras or themes if you're going to stick with that. Even if we weren't, and even if we were doing William Wyler, it would have been cooler and more interesting to how actual film study is, to like have had these. And like, you know, I'm more than just some nerd that says we should have had Zombies mode of Solaris, where we should have had Stalker, the original film version. Even homage to Stalker the video game. This whole thing is a key part of homage versus nostalgia. Now, nostalgia is basically, oh, remember this, and that is basically what they did with Infinite Warfare. That's what they did with Stranger Things. It's how you do a period piece at all now in today's modern day. And I also thought, as a parting idea, if you did Soviet Creature from the Gulagoon, it would have been really cool if we had a Hind gunship that we could just shoot the crabs with. Although I guess if it's set in the 1950s, the Hind hadn't been invented yet. Which you gotta give the Soviets credit to just pull an attack chopper out of their ass. But you know, it would have been fun if you could have made like a transport helicopter, like the Mi-58 or whatever the designation it was. It would have been fun to like fly that around. Especially you could have a part of the map that's more submerged and hardly land, and if you wanted to, you could have a character spawn there and then have to be rescued, and it would be cool. Because think about every Zombies map. A video game is a toy in essence. So every Zombies map is a playset, and it would have been cool to have like the vehicle be the vehicle where you go and you play with your friends and you're like, I'm gonna rescue you, and you know, it would have been cool. Even if you can't have a Hind because you're being era appropriate 1950s, you could have the Mi-8 transport helicopter, whatever they're called. I said something different. This is basic design, folks. I hope you really liked that. Pretty much all I got. That's what I would have done for all these maps. I don't know about the final one, although the final one would have been cool if you literally made a huge map that just mixed all the other maps together somehow, and like you could run through them. The only thing I don't like is when a map is split 4 ways, like that Black Ops 4 map that was all the environments in one: jungle, urban, snow. That's corny. But like, I don't know, a huge map where you could see the weird division and like the different color of the water, because we'd be mixing like, you know, Caribbean pirate with Ukrainian Black Sea. I love you all. I love the people that inspired me to do this. I love writing down ideas and talking about them, and I like video games and movies and breaking them down and stuff. If you could do me a favor, like and subscribe down below. That was very cringe to say. Thank you.